Hi.
Greetings. We're on page 104 of the Pure Worship book, and then we thought we'd start by just showing you the illustrations. Here's the two we want to focus on today. At the top of the left-hand page here, you can see a man, that is a brother, standing at a podium and obviously conducting a meeting. And judging by what's beside him, wine glasses on a table, we have to construe it's a memorial service at one of the Kingdom halls. Mm-hmm. And the caption under that is Pure Worship Free from Idolatry. Now this is all about promises that God has kept, presumably promises that have been made or prophecies made in the book of Ezekiel that are being fulfilled among Jehovah's Witnesses. So number one is pure worship free from idolatry. And you can see the second picture is one of our sisters with a tablet. And I remember our surprise some years ago when the last Jehovah's Witness called on our home that they were using these tablets exclusively, and the Bible was not even consulted anymore.
Yeah, they read straight off the tablet, scripture verses.
And the point they're making in this picture of the sister with the tablet seems to be an end to spiritual famine. Mm-hmm. So the end of spiritual idolatry is prophesied according to Ezekiel, and that's being fulfilled by you. And an end to spiritual famine is being fulfilled by you. So we want to read what they have to say about all of this, because I'm anxious to see how Ezekiel connects to these pictures.
So they lay it out as five promises, five prophecies being fulfilled modern day with modern day witnesses. So we're going to just do promise number 1 and promise number 2. Promise number 1. An end of idolatry and other disgusting religious practices. At the end of the 19th century and the beginning of the 20th, faithful Christians were gathered together and were beginning to discard false religious practices. Veneration of a triune God, belief in the immortality of the human soul, and the hellfire doctrine were all cast aside as unscriptural teachings with roots in false religion. The use of images in worship was exposed as outright idolatry. Gradually, God's people also came to see the use of the cross in worship as a form of idolatry. And they reference Ezekiel 14:6 and Ezekiel 9. Is what we would reference.
Not there, though.
They don't reference it.
Okay.
But in comparison. So we'll talk about that after. Promise number 2. A restoration of the spiritual land of God's people. As they left Babylonish religion behind, faithful Christians found themselves in their proper spiritual land. A blessed condition or environment where they would never again suffer spiritual famine. And they suggest reading Ezekiel 34, verses 13 and 14. As we will see further in chapter 19 of this publication, Jehovah has blessed that land with an unprecedented flow of spiritual nourishment. Ezekiel 11:17. So going back to promise number 1, the end of idolatry and other disgusting religious practices.
So the end of idolatry is linked in this first paragraph to
teachings,
the teaching of the Trinity, for instance, as if it's idol worship to worship the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit, but it's not idol worship to worship eight or 10 men and to go to them continually, refer to them continually as the only organization that God is using today.
And to be requested to be loyal to them as part of the condition. You must be loyal to them. When you talk about images, I mean, I've noticed how you don't think, when you see witnesses now, it's not the Watchtower you see. You see that little icon, JW.org. If you're talking to a witness, they point to, go to this site, JW.org. Is that not a symbol? Is that not an idol then? Because that's where truth is. seems to be.
Yeah,
That's where you're pointed to for getting any truth.
Yeah, that seems to be doubly ironic to me, that the organization that stresses itself more than any religion that we've ever been a part of or even know about, stresses its own identity nowadays, even with this JW thing, which I thought in the day when I was thinking about the name Jehovah's Witnesses, I do remember thinking it's significant that in those days when I became a witness, the name was not capitalized, and then it was capitalized, and I thought, well, we crossed a line here. But now it is a symbol of something. JW,
it's a brand.
the name, the sacred name we were taught, has now become a brand.
Yeah, yeah.
But you don't see that as idolatry.
Yeah. So and then you accuse Christendom of being idol worshippers. No clergyman is ever going to ask you for unfailing loyalty to them.
Yeah.
You must listen to what I say, and you must agree, and you must obey. Nobody asked you to do that.
You've met hundreds and hundreds of clergymen, and not one of us has insisted that he's the only person God is using today.
And they don't ask you to just have blind loyalty to them. What they tell you to be worshiping is God.
Yeah.
Worship God. Christ is the gospel message. He's the center.
Yeah.
They don't point to themselves.
And then there's a real double irony in the last point they make in that paragraph about the cross. Read that sentence again.
Gradually, God's people also came to see the use of the cross in worship as a form of idolatry. Christians don't bow down and worship crosses.
I have never seen a Christian, not even a Catholic, and I've met a lot of Catholics, I've never seen them kiss a cross. Certainly Protestants have almost as much of an aversion to the symbol itself. A lot of conservative Christians, Protestants generally, have an aversion, just like you do, to the symbol even, and don't even want to wear it, let alone worship it. But the irony here is that in the book you're using, Ezekiel, you have chapter 9, where the cross, the tau, or ta, is the symbol of salvation. Do you not? Well, we've said it before in one of our other videos. They haven't acknowledged that in this book, although they have elsewhere in the Finished Mystery. 107 years ago, you acknowledged you knew what that symbol was. It was a cross, and the mark that this was the great work of Pastor Russell to go around marking the heads of those in Christendom who were sighing and groaning with the sign of the cross.
Yeah.
So you know it. But you're not acknowledging that in here.
Yeah.
I'm not even sure the writers of this particular article know it, but they should, because they haven't done their homework otherwise. But if they have done their homework and they're hiding it, which seems to be the case, then they're guilty of hypocrisy as well as idolatry, because you're worshiping men, and you're making an issue of something that was never an issue even for your founder. Then you get to the famine. Who is starving to death here? When we saw the sisters that came to call on us carrying the tablet, and every time we asked them a question, instead of going to the Bible, they would say, well, let's go to JW.org. And we saw in front of our eyes the idolatry in its most obvious form.
And even when you asked them a question, and they'd look it up, and they'd read it to you, and it didn't answer the question, well, that's what they tell us, Like, there was just no thinking going on as to, okay, but that doesn't answer the question we asked about this text. It's like they're not thinking. They're just blindly, feeding you whatever they're fed.
I was inevitably going to go back to my early days as a pioneer, when we were being encouraged as pioneers back in the 70s to master the Bible so that we would know how to give an answer to everyone. They seem to be giving the opposite advice nowadays. Get away from Bible discussions as fast as you can. Just show them.
Direct them to JW.org, and that's what they do.
Yeah.
They don't have a conversation with you. They just direct you to the organization. Do they not have confidence in their people? Or maybe they don't. They're scared that they will say the wrong thing.
Yeah. But
just before you even get into that, this whole concept is strange here. A restoration to the spiritual land of God's people. What is a spiritual land? Where does that concept even come from? A spiritual land?
Well, it has to come, doesn't it? It's inevitable it will come, because you cannot take these prophecies literally.
Yeah.
Although they were literal in the first case, you admit.
Yeah. So even the reference they give is Ezekiel.
Yeah,
Ezekiel 34 verses 13 and 14. You think about this spiritual land that is talked about.
just
here.
listen to these words and see if you can spiritualize them. I will bring them out from the peoples and gather them from the countries. Are those literal countries? And I will bring them into their own land, and I will feed them on the mountains of Israel. Mountains of Israel, by the ravines, and in all the inhabited places of the country. I will feed them with good pasture, and on the mountain heights of Israel shall be their grazing land. There they shall lie down in good grazing land, and on rich pasture they shall feed on the mountains of Israel. And this is about you.
But it sounds very literal, like literal land.
Is there significance in the fact that they don't quote it here? They just tell you to read it.
Yeah.
And when you do read it, you bump into
Yeah.
words about literal land, including mountains, ravines, valleys, pastures.
Mm-hmm.
Only those willfully blind will miss the point of a verse like that.
Yeah. The last line was, Jehovah has blessed that land with an unprecedented flow of spiritual nourishment. So I guess they're the land. And they're giving you an unprecedented flow of spiritual nourishment. Look at the size of the book. Look at this. That's their feeding for...
The entire book of Ezekiel is dealt with in how many pages? About 250, right?
With loads of pictures.
And about 100 pages of that is pictures.
And it's not consecutive readings of Ezekiel. It's a joke to say that you're being spiritually fed.
And it's
when we were witnesses, we were starving to death.
We were starving to death even under the old regime, where their books were much more substantial than this one.
And they were generally just a repeat of things. Just over and over again, repeating of things.
Yeah, I just want to show you a contrast so you don't think we're talking off the top of our heads here about what's available if you really want it. At about 4 months ago, we decided to study the book of Ezekiel in our Zoom groups that we have. And I already had a shelf full of books on Ezekiel. I mean, really good commentaries that I wouldn't want to get rid of. And some of them were very substantial. Some of them were hundreds of pages. But then I thought, I need to get updated. So I went out looking.
Older publications.
These are books prior to the 1990s, let's say. So I thought I needed some newer information. So I went out and looked, and I picked these books. Douglas Stewart, Preacher's Commentary on Ezekiel. As you can see, it's pretty substantial. By the way, no pictures. Leslie Allen, 2 volumes. 800, 900 pages, 2 volumes, no pictures.
On Ezekiel, yeah.
Ian Duguid, I don't know if that's how you pronounce his name, again, substantial volume. No pictures except on the cover. And this is rated the #1 commentary nowadays by most conservatives. This is Daniel Block's commentary, about 1,600 pages. 1,600 pages, no pictures.
On Ezekiel.
This, according to the data within this, and one of the other commentaries too, it takes about 8 to 10 years of work to put together a commentary of this quality, not to mention quantity.
So when it's not that that there's no value in the older publications, but the newer ones are not just a repeat of somebody else's old one. They in a newer commentary, they themselves will read as much as they can on that particular book.
Yeah.
And then whatever updated information that might have come, say, in archaeology or information, background information that has been discovered since, that's what they're going to comment on.
This is why you need newer commentaries on books that are definitely embedded in history, like Ezekiel and the prophets are, or the Gospels for that matter, and Genesis, books that are embedded in history, and there's new archaeological or historical information being upturned all the time. But another point we need to make about sets like this that are pretty famous, this is the New International Commentary on the Old Testament. Now they've been around. These ones have been published since the 60s, and they keep getting replaced or re-edited because new information is coming forth all the time. But what you don't get is replaced. That is, you don't get Daniel Blott's commentary completely thrown out because there's new interpretations like you do with the Watchtower, which has had to throw it out 3 times
Yeah.
to get to this one, which is their 6th book on Ezekiel.
They're not just rewriting it. And that's because they take it seriously. They're not reinterpreting everything into a spiritual land. And but you were mentioning that when you were a witness, you went to the Bethel.
Yeah, I do recall.
Bethel Library.
We all know what cognitive dissonance is, and I think one of the first times I felt that seriously was probably the year I was baptized. So this would be early 70 or 71 when I was baptized in the summer. I went to visit Canadian headquarters in Toronto. A pioneer who was now on the Bethel staff invited me to come and see it. He was in our congregation. His name was Bob, and he showed me around. And the thing that impressed me the most at Bethel, besides the staff and the cleanness, was the library. The library was, well, it was as big as some community libraries that I'd seen. And I wanted to know what was in it, so I guess I asked naively, Bob, what are all these books? Because I knew we didn't publish them. And he said, take a look around. So I looked around, and I was seeing all these commentaries on the entirety of Scripture, Old Testament, New Testament. What I didn't know, although I was impressed by the quantity and the fact that you have all these books here, so obviously you're well read, right, you people at Bethel? I didn't know that, nobody here reads them. They're just here for reference sake. But who are the people that are on the shelves? Who are the people who actually put together these books? Lexicons, Bible dictionaries, and Bible commentaries. Who are they? It took me years to figure out that almost all of those people are clergymen.
Yeah.
Dedicated clergymen who have spent most of their lives researching these subjects.
Yeah. So, and yet we criticize them. Typically, the lay witness is always criticizing Christendom. So, and yet the Bethel has it stocked in their library.
As you know, Ray Franz made the same discovery not long before I did,
and
in
it
the late
bothered
60s.
Him somewhat.
It bothered him,
and
but he didn't act
some of his other companions.
Yeah.
They would be recommended to look what they said.
Even Fred Franz advised him to do that. Fred Franz goes, go look at, and he gives the name of the commentary.
Wow.
So it's an absolute scandal that they should talk about famine being over for us, but for Christendom, they're still starving to death.
Yeah, don't they make a kind of reference like that?
It's exactly the opposite of the truth.
Yeah.
What's our link?
The link we were going to put up was to do with the Ezekiel 9 passage that you found out about, and it's Finnegan is the source. Yeah. It's the first of a series, the cross and the name of God in Ezekiel and Revelation. So the first of a series. Yeah, you can follow the links.
That's Jack Finnegan, who the Watchtower cites quite a bit over the years. I first found his name in the Watchtower Archaeology of the New Testament. So he's a famous New Testament scholar. And what does he have to say about the cross in Ezekiel?
And the playlist about the cross, too.
See you next time.